Hi, my name is Shannon with Windblown Ideas, and I want to show you how to make my ball paper peony. The tools that we'll use are a shaping mat. You can use a piece of foam, a mouse pad. This is a yoga mat that's been cut into squares. And these metal ball shaping tools, metal molding cups and plastic molding cups. This is a DIY paper flower making tool that I make. I have a video showing how to make it. It's made simply with corrugated cardboard, floral wire, and glue. And we use a quilling tool, which is just a tool that has a metal pin on the end and there's a slot in it that little strips of paper go into, and that's how I roll up the centers, and some fine tipped tweezers. The first thing we'll do is get our calyx ready for the base of the flower. So I have the calyx piece and a little piece of bind wire. I normally don't turn my flowers into bouquets. I put this on the back and I can attach it to all sorts of things. If you want to have it on a stiff wire, you can just wait and attach that to the center after you've assembled all the other parts of the flower. So I scrunch each part of the calyx, not following anything too carefully. We're just wanting to break down some of the paper fibers so that it just forms a little more naturally around the flower. So I'm just pinching it, and then I'll smooth it out a little bit. I did forget to mention another tool that I use, and it's just these shaping sticks. I get them at the grocery store in the kitchen department. They're called corn sticks. You can stick them into the end of a piece of corn, but they're great tools for shaping flowers as well, especially the peony, and you'll see why later. But I use this and just curl up each leaf, kind of like curling ribbon. You put the stick on top of it and your finger behind it, and you just kind of smooth it out. And then what I want to do is take my piece of wire and just fold about 1/4 of an inch bit of the wire. I just fold it so that it forms a 90-degree angle, and then you'll come up from the bottom. So the calyx has the leaves curled up, the wire comes up through the hole that's in the bottom, like that. And then I'm going to put a little bit of glue right here and fold the wire over on top of it, and that will hold it in place. And just hold it for a couple of seconds. And that part is done. So I can just put it on my little paper flower tool and set that aside. I'm going to show you how to make the centers for these flowers. I use, it's a strip, and this center really needs to be cut with a cutting machine. You can make this flower by hand, but you would just need to use a strip of paper and hand fringe it because these just are not practical for hand cutting. But I have examples of the different sizes and kind of fullness you get with, like, these first 3 are 8/10 of an inch high, these 3 are 1 inch high, and then these are 1 1/4 inch high. And the difference with these is there's 1 strip, 2 strips put together, and 3 strips put together. And it's a good idea to make something like this to have in front of you as you're making flowers, to be able to try different sizes and see what kind of fullness that you like in your flower. So this is the fine, or the fine center strip, and this is a more simplified version that is in the cut file that I sell for making this. I love the more organic natural movement in this center, and this is the one that I always use. But this one is easier to cut probably maybe with other cutting machines, I don't know, because I create an SVG file for these. I also have it in a PNG file, and I was able to convert it. And it still worked, but ideally you would use it as an SVG file. So I'll show you how I shape this, and we will be using the quilling tool and a shaping stick. And this could be a pencil, a paintbrush handle, lots of different things. And it's a very simple technique that I use. All I do is I just curl the end of a few this way, and I just grab whatever's sticking up high. So I don't even shape every last bit, but I just put the pencil on top and curl it over. And then I go on the other side and curl back the other way. And this is where the movement comes from in the centers. And for this, the size of flower that I'm making today, I use 2 strips that I shape, and then I just quickly glue them together. And I'll show you how we roll it up using the quilling tool. It can be done. Some people make these kinds of centers just rolling them with their fingers or with tweezers, but a quilling tool is very inexpensive, and I find it just makes the job much easier. Okay. Now what we'll do is glue these 2 pieces together. I just put a little bit of glue there and lay this on top of it, a little less than 1/4 of an inch, and just hold it in place for a few seconds. And you just want to let it sit for a few seconds, but it doesn't have to sit for very long, because if you pull on it right away, they'll come apart, but they actually hold together very quickly. There is a slot in the end of this, and you want to put the very end of the strip into the slot. You push up until it's hitting on the bottom of the paper, and you just turn it over 1 or 2 times so that the metal is completely covered with paper, and apply just a little bit of glue. That will just help to hold it in place. And then you just start rolling it up. The key thing to remember is to learn to keep it, you don't have to pull very hard, but you do want to keep pressure so that it wraps fairly firmly around the entire strip. And you want to keep the bottom as level as you can, but we can help to flatten it when we're all done. Now what you don't want to do is keep gluing as you roll it up. I have seen students do this in workshops, and they do it very carefully and very slowly, but without keeping it flat on the bottom, and you end up with a deformed shaped, permanently glued center. So it's best to just glue it when you start, keep firm pressure on it, wrap the whole thing up, and then we won't apply more glue until we get to the very end. And then you can flatten it on the table. So we'll just, apply some glue right here. Wrap it around. You just need to hold it for a few seconds, and you just push up from the bottom, and it comes right off of the pin. And this is fairly flat. It's not too bad, but if they're not flat, you can put it on the table and just use your thumb, and you don't want to squish the whole thing, but you can press down enough that it will flatten the bottom. Now, if you need to, you can just apply a smear of glue on there to hold it in place, because if you mess around with this too much without it being glued in place, you can pull the whole thing apart. So you can glue it. I don't usually, but you can if you need to. I want to show you how to shape the simple center that is included in the ball peony tutorial. It looks like this, and rather than going back and forth with the direction that I shape these, I just take a stick, put it underneath of the center, and I just kind of roll it all over in one direction. And then I use the quilling tool, and you roll it up so that the curve is inward towards itself. So you do the same thing where you put it in the quilling tool, into the slot, wrap it around itself, put a drop of glue, continue all the way to the end, and put another piece of glue. After it has been rolled up, it will look like this. And in order to make it look like this, we just have to pull each piece out. I use this is a little clay shaping tool. Another thing you can use is a cuticle stick. You just want to grab a couple pieces and pull them out. Grab a couple pieces and pull them out. And you just continue going all the way around, grabbing a few pieces and pulling them out. And the further you get to the center, the less you pull them out, and it just creates the opened up shape that you can see here. And then you would just insert it in the center in the same way. And these, I really like both of these centers, and they can be used in lots of different flowers, and the centers of roses as well. So it's a really versatile center to have. I'll start with my largest petals and work my way down. The three largest ones are all shaped with the same size cup. And so you want a shaping mat underneath of you. It really helps to hold the metal cup in place without slipping around. And use the larger ball tool that you have. And what you want to do is place each petal all the way back to where it connects with the center. So the whole arm of each petal and the entire petal will be going into the cup. And the way you choose the size of cup is basically the round part of the petal fills the cup. That's kind of how you find the right size for each one. So you hold it up to the edge, and I pinch it over with my thumb so you can see that it's not, you don't start down here where the petal starts to turn into a circle, but you start all the way back to the very center. And you pinch it over, kind of press it down a little bit. And I found that it works best if you just kind of use gentle pressure going all the way around in a circle. It helps to prevent some of the major creasing. And basically what you want to do is apply fairly firm pressure on the entire surface of the petal into the round cup. And it takes on the shape of the cup, but you have to press the entire surface, and there will be some folding over. That's the only way we turn this flat shape into a very round shape. And the finesse that you work on as you practice making these flowers is kind of directing where those folds go. I prefer to have them more towards the back part of the petal rather than out on the very tip. But sometimes paper just has a mind of its own and goes its own way, and that's okay. And so you just continue going around each petal, and it takes practice to learn how to hold the paper and the cup and get it all shaped. But after you've made these flowers a few times, it gets pretty easy. See, this one is really folding up a bit, but that doesn't matter. And this is the one flower that takes the most muscle out of all of them that I make. This is, I'm making a 4.5 inch ball peony right now, and that doesn't take nearly as much effort. But when you get into the larger ones, it takes a fair bit of effort to shape each petal, but it's worth the look that you get out of it. And this is the process for shaping each petal. So I will do this with each layer. Like I said, the first 3 will be done with this shaping cup, and then the next size gets shaped in the largest of the plastic, and then my smallest one will be shaped with the next size down. And then I'll show you, once we do this to each petal, I'll show you how to then form each layer even further. Now we get to the fun part of shaping each layer so that we really see why it's called a ball peony. The largest one doesn't need much. It's pretty good as it sits. You just kind of want to make sure they're all curling up about the same distance. The next layer, we're going to want to bring it in a little bit, but not very much. So you can just press a little bit on the layers, but as we assemble it together, the outer two end up very much the same. The next one we need to pay more attention to. We need to bring it up more, and so you'll want to take the smaller end of your large ball tool and just run from the beginning of the arm toward the center, kind of on each side of each petal, and do that with each one, and that's going to curl each petal up. So just start out toward the petal and press in toward the center, going along each side of each arm. And you can see how that just has brought that whole layer into a nice formed ball shape. And when you really want to bring things up, you press in a circular motion pressing in the center, and that draws things up. Now as we get closer to the center, we want to really bring it in. So I would probably go with a little bit smaller. I'll go with this one. And you do the same thing. We want to draw each arm up independently. So start on one side, pull to the center, and do that on each petal. Pull into the center, and we're making our paper go where we want it to go. And I oftentimes will kind of arrange each petal so that they overlap all the way around, and then give it a good swirl in the middle, and that really brings up a nice ball shape. You can see how that already has turned into a nice little ball. And now this is our innermost one, and we're going to do the same thing, drawing up each arm by pressing toward the center. And I will overlap going all the way around, and then swirl it in the middle. And sometimes things are stubborn and you kind of have to look where you might need to shape it a little. You can also turn it into a little ball like that. Maybe I'll go with an even smaller tool. But I like how you look. And then there's something else that I do to my two outermost layers. You can see I just kind of roll them back a little bit. You don't have to do that, but it's just something that I started doing when just making a particular kind of flower, and I like the way that it looks. So you can leave them as they are and just put them together, or I curl over the outer two most layers. And to do that, you can use a paintbrush handle. There's lots of, a lot of pencils, markers, any long, round tool will work. And it's very gentle. You don't want to do a dramatic shape on it. You just lay it on the back side of the petal and gently roll it over the stick. And you can see what it's doing there. Okay, there we go. We have our layers, and now we can put them together. Now we're going to put together each layer on top of the calyx that we have sitting on top of our paper flower tool. And I love this art glitter glue, dries clear. It's the best glue I have found for paper, because I'm not a big fan of hot glue. I like just once I use this, I just never want to use anything else. If I'm working with something really large, then I'll pull out my glue gun. But for most of the flowers that I make, I use this glue and it dries really fast. It's really easy to work with. And the fine tip applicator is essential for making this flower. Start by putting basically a donut of glue around the wire in the middle and put on the first layer. And I use these sticks are really handy because there's the flat part on the bottom and the pointy part on the other end, and I make use of that in making this flower. So when I'm putting on the bottom layers, I just use the flat part, count for 5 or so seconds, and move it to another part, press down for another, I usually count either 5 to 10 seconds with each little bit of pressure that I apply. And then I put another donut of glue around, put on your next layer, offsetting the petals so that they're not directly on top of each other, but running in between where the earlier set went. And press. And with each layer that you press, you're pressing, you know, again on the layer underneath of it. So on the first ones, you don't have to hold it down very long. And this glue really does grab quickly. And now with this one thing that is important to keep in mind when you're layering these together and applying your glue is that you want to keep the glue as close to the center as possible. Because if you apply glue farther out, as the glue dries, it's going to pull what you shaped into a beautiful ball out flat. So in order to maintain the shape that we created, you really have to keep your glue close to the circle. And then you just look to make sure that it's offset. And as you get into these round ones, that's when I start to use the pointy part of the shaping sticks. Just hold it for a few seconds on each side. And then go to your next ball. And you especially want to just have the glue right around the hole. You don't want too much, but you want to make sure that, you know, your layers are going to get a good grab from paper to paper. And press for, I usually count to 5, move my little sticks and count to 5 again. And now for our final piece. And you can pull these apart a little bit to set this in. And sometimes if I'm not able to grab a hold of it well, you can use tweezers to twist it if you need to. But actually that fell in a good spot. And then press it in place. And after it's assembled like this, it's a good idea to let it sit for, even just 30 seconds to a minute. Gives it a good chance for everything to adhere well, but you can see the shape that forms by putting those layers together. It's a really pretty flower. This is a stylized leaf that I have made to go with my peony flowers. When you get the SVG files for this, it comes in, it has score lines. I don't know if you see that this has 4 score lines that follow the curve of the flower on each leaf. It also has the option of just having a single score line that goes down the middle. Or when I first made these flowers, there were no score lines. And how I shaped them was much like I did with the Calyx. I would just do what I call a directional scrunch. I would just pinch the leaf multiple places along the length of the leaf, and then kind of smooth it out a bit. And I really liked the texture that it gave to the leaf, but it really started to make my hands cramp after really having to pinch really hard on lots of leaves. And I made the single score line, which that gives you a fast option for a simple dimensional leaf, where you just kind of fold on the one score line and so it can add dimension. It's super simple, and you can do this in a multitude of colors as well. It doesn't even have to be just green. It's really pretty in lots of different colors. And then I thought, why not put several score lines on this leaf? And so you can, and you don't have to be real careful about following the line. It can be a pretty fast folding, because you don't even have to. You can still kind of scrunch it, but with lines to follow, it just makes it easier, and you don't have to apply as much pressure. So I can make these quickly without getting hand cramps. And so I really like the way that these look. And the way that I attach them is I then put bind wire on the back of each leaf. And then wrap them in floral tape. A peony bud. To make them, you just need 2 of the same size petals, a calyx, and a wire for holding it. And these can be made any size, little teeny tiny ones up to much larger ones. And there's no, you don't need a styrofoam ball or a cotton or anything on the inside of it. You're able to just shape the 2 flat petals to create this ball bud. And so first I'll shape the calyx just like we did before, just scrunching each leaf. And using a stick to flatten it out and curl it up. And when you're doing these buds, you want to curl it up pretty dramatically, because you can see that it's going to come up all the way around the entire bud. So it's just easier to glue it that way if you shape it that way to begin with. And this is really small, and you want the hole in the middle to be small. You want it just large enough for whatever wire that you're going to put through it, and if you need to enlarge it at all, this is a little mini awl, and I use this all the time. So it just gradually gets larger as it goes up, so you can very quickly and neatly enlarge a hole in whatever you're working on. And I just fold up a little bit of this, put it up through the bottom, and put a little bit of glue where I will fold that wire over on top of it, and it will hold it in place. And this will also be made on the DIY paper flower tool. So I'll just set this on here for when we're ready to come back to that. Now we're going to shape these petals. And on this, when I'm making the buds, because it has to be such a, you really want a complete sphere. So it needs to be very rounded. So I start on the cup where it fills it, you know, just by the surface of it fills the opening. So I start shaping there, and then I actually move it down to the smaller cup so that it's a nice tight ball. Just makes it much easier. The more work you put into shaping it properly, then it makes it very easy to assemble and put together. So I'll start by, make sure you get all the way back to where the arm reaches the center, and then you can just go right over to the next cup, and you can see that makes a very nice little half circle. And then do that with each one. Now we're going to shape each of these into the tight ball. And we do this the same way we shaped the other petals. You start by drawing each petal up by applying pressure in straight lines from the edge of the petal towards the center on each side of the petal. And then I kind of wrap them around each other. And swirl it in the middle. And you can see how it starts to come together easily to make a little ball. We will be gluing it in place, but it will be much easier to glue the more of a ball you start with. We do the same thing with the other petal. And now we'll swirl it in the middle. And that comes together in a nice, easy ball. And I use the plastic cup for helping to glue this into place. Now this is something where you have to just look and see where the paper is going to naturally come in contact with the petal that's underneath of it, because what you want to do is just put a little glue underneath the petal where it's going to make contact, and then it will pretty easily hold itself in place. So you do this around under each petal, and then you can just put it into the cup that you started shaping it in, and just hold it 15 or 20 seconds maybe until it will hold its shape. And this is going to go inside. This will be the innermost petal. So you want to make this one, it doesn't have to completely come together in the center, but you want it to all come together pretty closely. You can have just a little tiny hole. That way the wire can come up through it. And when it's to the point where it will hold itself together, you can set that aside and glue the other one onto the calyx. I start by putting a little donut of glue around the wire and just set this on here and just kind of press down for 5 or 10 seconds to help hold it into place. And then we're going to put this ball inside of this ball. So we'll put some glue around the base here, and it can even come up a bit on the sides. The only thing is you need to be careful when putting it inside. Just kind of pull it apart, insert the wire into the hole, and then it comes up there. And you do want to make sure that your petals are offset. So you have to kind of peek and see where that gap is. And then again, you'll overlap the petals one after the other so that they form a nice spiral shape around that inner bloom. And then you do the same thing again. You put a little bit of glue underneath each petal where it's going to make contact. And this will help. And I've made these different ways. Sometimes you can make a nice looser bud, or it can be a really tight bud. You can play around with it. But you want to get it underneath of each petal. Make sure that it's going to come together in a nice shape. And then you also put glue up the inside of each of the calyx leaves, and then just pull them up around the sides like that. And you just need to hold this in place 15 or 20 seconds or less. As long as everything is shaped well to begin with, it holds very easily. It's already holding itself together. And it's made this nice little rounded paper bud using just two petals and a calyx. So it doesn't take much materials at all. They're pretty quick and easy to make. You just need to put the effort into getting a nice round shape to start with. There we go.